I just don't think this is valid, is what I say.
I'm seriously asking. This isn't meant to impugn them. I just think that we throw gender next to identities as if that makes them categorically different from other types.
And here's where I argue no one has gamer dysphoria. So either we assume that gamer could be a gender, which is really fucking weird, or we could assume that gamer is a really important part of your identity, in which case, here's where I would say this isn't the case. There doesn't appear to be gamer dysphoria in existence, and gamers don't, in any way, shape, or form, experience marginalization beyond the jokes we have and the pretend abuse they've supposedly gotten from Anita Sarkeesian. Hey everyone, happy Halloween, or thereafter, because by the time you see this, it is going to not be Happy Halloween anymore, though it will be Spooky Month 2. Two. I can't do twos. 2. So, 2. There you go. Yata. So, someone's going to clip that. I know it.
It's going to be so bad.
Chat is so fucking horny. Anyway, here's the thing. So, you'll know back on September 20th, we put out a video about Vosh's takes on neopronouns and xenogenders. And I don't want to rehash that whole argument, but me and Zena had some thoughts on dysphoria and gender stuff, and we don't really know how they all fit together, so we're just going to kind of ramble and move into them. The first part's going to be my thing. The second part's going to be Zena's thing. So,
to some degree. I've been thinking about the dysphoria stuff too. So.
Oh, yeah, of course. I'm not saying I'm cutting you off from, responding to this thing either.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. So, at about the 33-minute mark of that video, apparently I responded to Vosh by saying that, gamer gender really isn't particularly a compelling straw man because gamers, for example, don't experience dysphoria. Now, at least 2 or 3 people in the comments responded with something to the effect of, you don't need dysphoria to be trans. To which then I wanted to pull my eyes out. If there is one thing I have been abundantly clear about on the stream, as Zena has been clear on this as well, it is we are a big proponent of the notion of gender liberation. That is the idea that you can present and be however you want. You can be gender fucks. You can be fucking gender fluid. You can be binary trans. You can be whatever you feel you are. I'm not going to say what you want because that gets into some weird choice shit. Yeah, gender is fucking play. Schneiderman for the win. So here's the thing. When we're talking about that idea, the problem is that a lot of times people go off into sort of a la-la land-like space because they think it's just however you want. But the problem is there's a tension there, in my opinion. People don't just arbitrarily choose their gender. They don't arbitrarily choose which way they want to be. There's an internal drive. There's a series of experiences internally they have for them. A good example of 3 of those would be gender dysphoria, gender euphoria, and being gender ambivalent. There are other ones, but just hear me out. Whenever I bring up dysphoria, I get this pushback because I'm told to be trans doesn't require dysphoria, which I agree with, as does the APA. In fact, no one has argued that that's a thing at all. Dysphoria is but one thing, but it is not the only thing. And so the thing I want to talk about with gender here is just the difference between a sufficient and a necessary condition. According to trans medicalists, it is a necessary condition or a necessary criteria to have gender dysphoria. This is an absolute requirement, among many others. For them, you have to be a binary trans person, you have to to believe you're mentally ill.
Pursue pursue like HRT and whatever
yes, you
SRS
have to do
surgery
that. Yep.
is possible. Yeah.
Well, and they confuse the medicalization of gender dysphoria with the medicalization of being trans, which are very, very different things. Again, go read Julia Serrano for fucking God's sakes, Jesus. Anywho, the reason I'm bringing up a very basic logical thing is because people suck at it. to me, it's a necessary versus a sufficient condition. The reason why we dislike trans medicalists is because they're assuming dysphoria is a necessary condition, which it is not.
Mm-hmm.
It is a sufficient one. So what is a sufficient one? So to me, a necessary condition means this must be part of the list. It is a guaranteed thing. If you look at DSM-5 criteria, occasionally in the list, you'll get one that says they must have this. There's no ands, ifs, or buts. This must show up for them to be diagnosed this way. That is a necessary condition. It's a necessary criteria. But if you go through, occasionally you'll find groups of them where it'll show a number of suggestions, and you only need to hit a certain number of them. That's a sufficient condition. Yes, it's necessary for them to have a number of them, but it requires any of them out of that list. Any of them are sufficient. To me, if you just experience gender ambivalence, that is, let's say, I'll give an example. Here's a hypothetical. So if somebody is, say, I don't know, not really super a big fan of their assigned gender at birth, but they're also not really like against it. It's just they're just kind of meh it. Right? They nothing it. But let's say one day this person, I'll make them AMAP person puts on a skirt. And they're like, ooh, I like this. Is that person trans? Maybe. So I'll say this. By our hypothetical, if this person is experiencing gender dysphoria by wearing the dress and gender ambivalence towards their assigned gender at birth, their assigned gender at birth, they would be trans. If this is more like a paraphilic thing where they're just like cross-dressing, which, by the way, no harm, no foul, cross-dressers, we love you, you're good people, whatever. Birth. So, if there's one thing you take from this video, it's me mispronouncing the word birth. Anyway, my thought on this is based on this idea that the example I just gave is based on a person who does not experience any kind of gender dysphoria. They don't get weirded out by looking at their genitals. They don't find themselves suddenly really uncomfortable when they see like their chest, or they notice the lack of chest there. But when they suddenly get titties, they're really like, really like those titties. So to me, gender ambivalence or apathy is said in chat, or, gender dysphoria are all, in my humble opinion, sufficient conditions to be trans. And when I say sufficient, I don't even necessarily think you have to have any of those. All there has to be is an internal intuition that you are a gender other than the one assigned at birth. That is my only criteria. That is the only gate I will keep. That there is an internal experience that you have, for whatever fucking reason, that you do not resonate with your assigned gender at birth. Tiamat said in chat, hi, yes, I used to experience gender apathy all the time. Very dangerous because it leads to super easily into body and health. Yep, it leads to body apathy. I had the same thing. Dysphoria for me was a very subtle thing. It was very abstract. So for me, it was very much ambivalence for a lot of my life. And what I would notice is I would just put myself through a lot of risks. If you ever get a chance to see my hands close up, and I know what TERFs are going to say, go fuck yourselves. But if you look at my hands up close, I actually have a fairly large scar on here. I would take a lot of risks on this. I have scars all over my hands because I would be really, really fucking careless with stuff. I dropped a katana on here once. There's a fucking burn here from when I put it got knocked and pushed into a toaster when I used to work in a restaurant. My hands are kind of beat up and I just didn't care. Because in boy mode, I just couldn't give a fuck about my body unless my body was doing something for me, like working out, made me feel like girls liked me more and people paid attention to me more. Did I like the result? Not so much, but it was still a thing where it's like, this has some utility. To me, being transgender is never about whether you have dysphoria or not. Dysphoria is just one sign of many that points to it. Now, that's not to say we're going to devalue dysphoria. Dysphoria is awful. It sucks to have, trust me. If you don't have it yourself, and I know many of the people in our community do, gender dysphoria sucks. It sucks whether it's direct and it's physical, or whether it's social, or whether it's just very abstracted. And the thing is that with dysphoria, this comes down to the same issue I have in discussing neurodevelopmental disorders. I feel like sometimes we talk about these things in very general ways, like, oh yeah, just dysphoria, whatever. But in reality, dysphoria can be as bad as mild discomfort to cut this fucking thing off of me. We forget that a lot of binary trans people, especially in the 80s, had to deal with a lot of really, really rough stuff. Again, look at Julia Serrano's book, but she talks about this. The fact is that, again, for you to be able to get hormones and surgery, you would have to pass and you would have to be attractive to the doctor. Think about that for a power dynamic and how fucked that is. Holy shit. Ray Blanchard was not the only chaser. But this is the thing. Yeah. Back then, in order to perform femininity, you had to perform it perfectly. And where it got fucked is doctors caught on and realized that they were hyper-performing it in order to get pills and stuff, and then they set the gate further.
Well, yeah, so you had to walk that awful middle ground of like their perfect version of femininity. So you couldn't be too femme, but then you also like couldn't be not femme enough, right? Yeah. And this is never like, yeah, like cis women, we're also dealing with this stuff, but there's still these little leeway as far as like, hey, you don't have to like every goddamn thing, it's fine. But for trans women, no, you had to be walking that line super carefully. Well, and the thing is the doctors didn't get is they had set up essentially an obstacle course. They set the barrier up, and then when we reacted accordingly and compensated and adapted to the barrier, they then moved the fucking goalpost. Yep.
Yeah, you had to be very precisely binary trans. We forget this because in this day and age, depending on where you're at and what doctors you have, because this is not true for everyone, but a lot of people have better experiences. I had better experiences. But the simple fact of the matter is not everyone has those. And back then, very few people did. If you were a non-passing trans woman, if you were somebody who was gender non-conforming, you had a hell of a time transitioning if you so desired. We have plenty of examples on YouTube of, demi-boys, non-binary people that are trans-masked, trans men who are still in that non-binary category-ish, who, by definition, have radically different experiences because in a lot of ways, AFAB people got treated very differently. That's not to say they didn't get shit on, nor did they get, prejudice either. But as I've told you guys before on stream, it's different, right? It's different in the sense that what we're talking about at that point is more of an ignorance. Again, we come back to the story that Contra told about Buck Angel, right? Where when he went into his doctors, the doctor had never worked with an AFAB person before. Think about that and how old Buck Angel is. That's right around that same time. Nobody really thought much about, trans men because they were too busy pathologizing trans women. This is part of our history. Again, please read Julia Serrano's book. It's fucking amazing. Anyway, my point with all this is that if you are under the impression that I believe dysphoria is required, or you're trying to make some kind of bizarre trans medicalist argument, I really, really need you to stop it, okay? Because this is just not accurate to the way we, in any way, shape, or form, think on this channel. The fact of the matter is that to be transgender, you only need to have some intuitive understanding that you are not the gender you were assigned at birth. That is it. This is why I am very much a trans liberation person. I am very much a transhumanist. I want people to be able to have freedom. If I want you to slot your fucking consciousness into a fucking uplifted octopus body with robot arms, spoiler alert, if we lived in that world, fucking do it. You go with your octopi self. The simple fact of the matter is that I just don't think there's any reason to judge anybody or come down on them for really arbitrary and frankly dumb reasons that are out of our power. And so that's kind of the argument there for me, is that if you think if we're doing some kind of transmedicalist thing, we're not. Dysphoria is a sufficient condition. It is a way to determine if someone is trans. It is not the only way, nor is it necessary. Very simply there. Zena, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think there's a certain amount of tone policing too that like I really would like to watch out for. Like when we're going off on like a segment, you know, do we want to stop the whole thing about talking about the actual topic we're on to like enumerate every single possible thing? No, not really, right? And so just get into this weird like, okay, I know you get it. Like, do you get it? Like, you know, so. And that's some of the hard part is just there seems to be this weird expectation to be able to cover all your bases possible in all the like potential every which ways, and just in some conversations there isn't really time for that, right? There isn't really a second because no, I'm explaining some other big topic that I'm actually focused on right now that people, you know, are watching me for at the moment. That's the one that I'm going on, right? And so it just gets a little weird sometimes, I think, with those kind of dynamics.
Well, and it's always a frustration of mine because, like, I'm a non-binary trans woman. How would I make the argument that dysphoria is a requirement? My very existence doesn't allow for that notion. Like, if I was literally, like, hardcore transmed, the word non-binary wouldn't come out of my mouth. Other than to, like, with a hushed tone and, you know, growling.
Right? Well, and, like...
Or turn, you know, my head would spin around like Linda Blair. I was going to say Blair White's, but either one's fine.
Well, everybody in our house is trans in some format, and we all experience, you know, dysphoria and euphoria and, you know, ambivalence differently, right? Like, dysphoria for me isn't usually like a loud dysphoria. Usually it's connected to PMDD dysphoria, which is similar, and pings the other one. But in a lot of ways, you know, through my youth, there was an offness that was there, but there wasn't like, I didn't really know what to do. It also isn't the biggest deal all the time, so I didn't care that much. So again, going back to that ambivalence. But again, how are we supposed to like go into all this during, you know, another segment? Something is, you know, gives a break.
Well, and again, if I'm making an argument, like this is the thing that really gets me about that stuff. And again, maybe this is me whinging, but like, if I'm doing a video with Zena about non-binary people being valid and neopronouns being valid, is that really what I'm saying? Like, is that what do you think that, like, again, I'm not trying to be mean to that commenter or any other commenter. I get how confusion happens, but there is also a level of good faith, right? Like, if I'm making an argument in favor of xenogenders, for fuck's sakes, do you really think I'm going to hold a transmed view? It's just weird. No, that's kind of my thoughts on that. That's the first part of this. Zena, you had some thoughts on a separate part, but it was related to dysphoria.
Well, it wasn't quite related to dysphoria, but it was related to this topic.
Yeah, go.
So this is part B. This is somewhat separate from the previous topic. So we're going to switch gears just a little bit. So go ahead and put dysphoria, you know, back on the shelf for a moment.
Those ears look so good. Anyway, sorry.
Thank you. And we're going to take down another book, and this one's going to be more like parasocial stuff. I don't know if parasocial is the right word. I'm trying to figure out the right language. There is this thing that I noticed that happens, and we usually don't figure it out until way after the fact, okay? And that is, and I'm not projecting this onto the last person, you know, that we're talking about, like, you're fine, okay? But there's a general interesting trend here where it seems like people will get into arguments with us, you know, via chat or, you know, messages, whatever else, that are kind of weird, kind of doubling down, but they're really pushing an agenda. Like, there's a big agenda. And the best that I can come up with is that maybe this is somebody wanting validation, and wanting it from us in some format. Except we don't know, right?
Oh, yeah, this discussion. Now I remember what you're talking. Oh, that one. Yeah, go. I have more, but please finish.
Yeah. And so it's been times like, there is a new site chat, by the way. Yes. So times where like, hey, we're talking about, you know, a mental illness topic, talking about like dysfunction. Yeah, that's some of the harder parts of it.
Transgirltherapist.org.
That one, yes. You know, and maybe somebody really needs to hear like, hey, it's still like, this mental illness doesn't mean, XYZ, insert, awful things that people have said. You're broken, you're, worthless, whatever else. Right. And when we argue with people, sometimes it looks like they're looking for, some validation, some kind of statement like that to kind of fulfill whatever need they have. Same thing, could be with trans stuff, right? Hey, I really need to hear right now that somebody needs to tell me that, like, my transness is not just dysphoria. Like, there's other positive parts to this, right? But we don't always figure that out until later, until we're like, oh, wait a minute, we just had an argument about this topic, instead of figuring out that what this person, might, at least, again, what it looks like after chat, right? We do think about these things very deeply. We do. That maybe somebody's looking for validation.
Well, and like the thing for me on this one is always like, I do wonder sometimes about that, because it does feel like sort of this notice me senpai thing, where like people will get really irritated in chat or really upset, and they'll leave a really, really like long comment, and it almost sort of feels like, to some degree they didn't like how I stated something, and so that made them feel invalidated, and now they want me to validate them, even though I don't know what we're talking about. What? Like, it's really odd to me now that I think about it out loud. It's like, it is this really strange thing of, well, you said this and I disagree with this. Like,
or this other person, very well could have had, 18 other different triggers coming up in that moment, and we would have no way to know, right?
Well, it's like the argument we made previously on the channel. For those who don't know, I've made the argument that, again, non-binary people are trans. There isn't an argument to be made here. These are just categorical differences. Trans people can be binary or non-binary. The original trans flag was literally blue for trans men, pink for trans women, and white for fucking gender non-conforming people, which we now call non-binary.
Well, and people get confused on that point when we say, hey, these groups are trans, and they think that it is some like hardcore like group social identity for like every single possible thing in their life, and we're like, no, we just noticed you're doing the trans thing, that's all.
It's just gender, right?
You're just taking action on the thing, like you just happen to fit in this definition. Really, it's okay.
And I got shit for it, because there was a lot of people saying that, like, again, yeah, transgender with transition, but I never say transition is a necessary condition. Again, coming back to that. So we get into this thing where, like, people are presuming that when I say non-binary people are trans, I'm somehow, like, trying to force them into a thing, when that's just how categories work. That's just language. And I've even made the room for people who, if you don't individually identify as trans, that is fine. I think that's weird. On the best case scenario, it's you just don't know trans history. Or on the worst case scenario, it feels a little internally transphobic or NB-phobic, but go off. I mean, that's your gig. But if we're just talking about large group categories, you're part of the trans community. The alternative is to do the gatekeeping shit that Calvin Guerra and Blair White did, where they're like, oh, they're not real transes, or, the offensive T-slur, right? They're not the real transsexuals.
Right.
God, most fucking dramatic man on the planet.
Well, I'm going to be real here. If you're like, hey, I'm cis, but I'm playing with pronouns right now, and I'm trying out different pronouns, you're doing the trans thing, right? You're experimenting with a gender thing that wasn't the one that you were assigned by, the systemic stuff already in place with, medical bullshit attached, right? You're doing the trans thing, and it's totally cool, and you're valid, and you're super welcome here. And if that play for you is, something that's going to be lasting, neat. If it's not, that's cool too. But, like, we want our community to be big enough to account for everyone, right? We want to include all of those various variations.
Well, and it just, otherwise we get into really dumb things. Like, let me give an example. Like, one of the 3 major pillars that hold up this channel is trans issues. Do you really think that, like, non-binary people aren't part of that? No. All transgender means is you do not identify as the gender you were assigned at birth. That's all it means. But people get so upset because they think I'm invalidating their non-binaries. What I'm saying is, not only are you valid, sweetie, you're also fucking part of the club. Get in here. We have cookies, bitch. It's so frustrating. Anyway.
You gotta post my cookie recipe for everyone. If you're in the Discord, I'll post that.
So I don't know if you have anything more on this.
If we roll back to the, some of the validation parts, I think maybe, you know, watching for those moments when you're like, I really need something, or why am I attached in this conversation, right? If you can pull back for a second and be like, what do I need? What am I getting out of this? I think that can kind of lead you to some of the answers. Because if you're looking for, hey, I need somebody to tell me I'm valid, like, if that's what you need in that moment, no. Like, God damn it, our whole community will, like, fill you with validating comments. Like, that is absolutely a thing that everybody here will do.
True. We have 3 separate channels for trans femmes, transmasc, and non-binary people. We have validation aplenty if you can make it into Euclid.
Right. But even just in chat, though, like, I know these guys, like, they will absolutely tell you, like, no, you're super valid. Like, hey, we get it. Like, we're, even on mental health stuff, like, hey, I deal with similar issues. You're not alone.
Pros Renegade, welcome to the site chat. Love you. Life Must Exist, you said, this really speaks to me because I've never really been comfortable with being called male or mister or whatever. I'm AMAB.
Mm-hmm.
I like my equipment and I don't have dysphoria, but I would never call myself trans because I don't want to downplay the struggle of others. And see, what I would say is you're just a he, them, non-binary person. And yeah, you can still own that while saying that there are trans people that have it harder than you. I know for a fact black trans women have it harder than me. But that doesn't make me not trans. It just means that there are differences in intersectionality. Yeah, if you're a she, they, AFAB, non-binary person, you're fucking valid. And guess what? Do you have the same struggles as somebody who is, say, like, binary trans or, someone who's a xenogender? Probably not.
Well, even Jess and I don't have the same struggles, right? We don't. There are definitely very different ways that dysphoria comes up for us, or, like, the ways that we have to interact with people. Like, it does come up differently for us and to different degrees. I think Jess would have killed someone in Roadblock. Somebody if insurance was fucking her on getting hormones for as long as I've been getting fucked on by my insurance right now.
I'd cry.
Yeah.
Cried.
We've been trying since July? I think July or August.
Yeah, apparently testosterone is now worth its weight in gold. And they're just trying to microdose. They're having to do it like, what the
I don't even want anything big right now. They're like, my insurance letters read like garbage. They're like, you need to meet these requirements for gender dysphoria, and you need to, like, have a doctor that's experienced in diagnosing this gender dysphoria. And this lady that I see literally is, like, super well known in the area. That's all she does. In fact, the clinic that she's at had to hire more people to handle all of the HRT cases. Right, so that way they can address, like, everybody. Like, you think she's not experienced? What? But, like, I don't know, like, life must exist. No, like, be trans, do your gender stuff and own it. Like, I would much rather, like, validate everybody and have everybody at the table with us. Like, I don't feel a need to ever have somebody left out, because when we leave people out for any number of reasons, that is when we start causing harm to our community. Okay, that's when we start reproducing the trauma that was done to us with medical gatekeeping. All right, that's what the Kelvin Guerras do and Blair Whites do. All right, they leave people out, ostracize them, other them, and we start doing more trauma that way as a community. So, no, I'd rather have everybody here.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the thing is like, if you're wondering, like, whether we're a safe community for you if you're non-binary or whatnot, like, this is dude, you're cool. Like, they're just here's the thing is I'm not gonna say I'm like some perfect bodhisattva of, like, acceptance. I have my own biases, my own shit. I'll be honest.
Dude, I grew up in Whiteville. I have work to do.
10 years ago, non-binary people didn't make a fucking lick of sense to me. You know what I did? I learned. I grew. Plural people, 2 years ago, didn't make sense to me, partially because of a very bad experience with one of them. But you know what? I learned and I grew. That's what I did, right? Because I try to take my own internal responses, and I always try to color them against my own values. And that value is that I am accepting. I always want the gate to be open. And until someone proves that they're acting in bad faith, the gate is still fucking open. So, with that said, I think that covers everything.
Yeah, as far as trans issues, social stuff, just, yeah, if you're in chat and you ever need to just feel like you need a validation, like, just say it flat out. Like, we can do that. We can absolutely like reaffirm that you're super valid for any number of reasons, be it trans related or mental health stuff related. Like, you're all really cool, and everybody shows up here, to hear us talk about this stuff. Like, you're all super cool. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we'll see you guys in the next one.
Bye.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. You can also ring the bell if you want to be notified of our videos. If you want to help the channel, you can donate at streamlabs.com/transgirltherapist/tip. You also can become a patron at patreon.com/transgirltherapist. As low as $3, you can support our channel. Thanks for watching.